up to my knees in blood. That's how committed he was for the American Revolution. He is quoted as saying, as they are fighting, "I hope I shall die up to my knees in blood." He is, in other words, he's willing to give his life for the cause. I hope I shall die up to my knees in blood. Well, what do the British do next? They make a second assault upon Breed's Hill. And not as successfully as the first, the colonial militia pounds them back again. And they retreat to the bottom of the hill and regroup. Not as easy as the first time, because there are more coming and less of them. Okay? So, during the first two assaults on Breed's or Bunker Hill, the reason it's in parentheses is because of the mistake. Major General Warren helps the militia to hold the line. He rallies the Patriots to stand their ground, and they beat him back for a second time. Are they going to quit? No, they're coming a third time. And unfortunately, by the time they make their third assault, they overwhelm Warren and his men. Hundreds of British soldiers swarm across those Patriot defense lines on top of the hill. They held them once, they held them twice, they could not hold them a third time. And some of the colonial militia were running out of gunpowder, and when they ran out of gunpowder, they simply scattered. They had no chance. They had no weaponry. So the third assault was the backbreaker for the colonists. It was at this point during the third charge that the American Revolution took its biggest blow to that point. Anybody know what the biggest blow was? What was the biggest blow the American Revolution took? The biggest blow is that Major General Joseph Warren is shot and killed at Breed's Hill. So it was at this point that the American Revolution took its biggest blow yet, as Major General Warren is shot and killed. The 34-year-old patriot becomes an American martyr for independence. The 34-year-old patriot becomes an American martyr for independence. Nick, what's a martyr? And I'll spell it for you. M-A-R-T-Y-R. M-A-R-T-Y-R. What's a martyr? Nick? He becomes a martyr for independence. There's good and bad about it being a martyr. The good thing is it's positive what you stood for, but the bad thing is you did. So someone that's a martyr is someone that lost their life believing in what? A cause. And his cause was the American Revolution. So, the 34-year-old patriot becomes an American martyr for independence, and he's killed at the Battle of Breed's Bunker Hill. Do I got something on my face, or you guys? Okay, perfect. All right, now, let's talk about this. When the smoke clears that ended the Battle of Breed's or Bunker Hill, Joseph Warren and 115 other Americans have lost their lives. When the smoke clears, ending the Battle of Breed's or Bunker Hill, Joseph Warren and 115 other Americans have lost their lives. Now, Lisa, my dear, I want you to give me your best guess on how many lives were lost on the British side. So we got 116 Americans, right, my dear? What do you think the British lost? Take a guess. Don't be bashful. Be all you can be. 100, okay? What do you think, Lily? Okay, now why would you guys, and most kids do, why would you think they would lose more? These guys were running up the hill into open fire at 50 yards. 1,054 British soldiers killed in the Battle of Breed's Hill. I mean, does that tell you how hard these American patriots were fighting? They lost 116. The British losses were 1,054. And part of it's because they marched straight into fire. And they were able to overwhelm the Americans because they had more what? People, more soldiers. Okay? Now here's the statistics. Of all the British forces that fought on Breeds or Bunker Hill, which is the same hill, more than half were either killed or wounded. More than half were either killed or wounded in this battle. So the losses were devastating. Devastating. Okay, did the Americans lose an important figure in that battle? Yeah. Joseph Warren. Actually, the British lost a pretty important person that we've talked about in the past. Let's see if we can figure out what British commander was killed in the Battle of Breeds or Bunker Hill.
Thomas Gage?
No, good guess. That's what most kids say, but he was not. No, he was shot way back on the gas.
He survived.
Yeah, he survived. But who else we talked about? Think about your notes. Do you remember the 77 Colonial Militia under John Parker that waited for the Redcoats to try to keep them from going to Concord? Who was leading the British troops during that day? John Pitcairn. And he was killed, John Pitcairn was killed in the Battle of Breeds or Bunker Hill. So the British lost a very important person as well. Okay, that'll take us to our next subtopic, which is the King's reaction. The King of England, King George III, the King's reaction to Bunker Hill. First of all, just so you know, King George III was pretty shocked at the news because he didn't realize, because Thomas Gage didn't realize, that these American colonists meant business. He was shocked at the number of troops that he lost, either killed or wounded, at the Battle of Breeds or Bunker Hill. He was shocked. And he was mad. He was so mad, for the first time, the American patriots were officially deemed...
heretics.
What?
Heretics.
What were our word? Rebels. When they referred to them, but for the first time in history, King George III officially claimed that the American colonists that were disloyal to England were now rebels. He proclaimed them rebels. And he did these two things immediately after proclaiming the colonial colonists rebels. Okay? First of all, this is pretty serious when you think about it. He ordered the Royal Navy, or the British Navy, to blockade all harbors in all colonies. So what's he cutting off, in or out? Any shipping at all. Yeah, food, supplies. So he puts a naval blockade and closes off all shipping to the colonies. Nothing will get in, nothing will get out. It's a naval blockade on the colonies. Second thing he does is he hires 10,000 soldiers from the German state of Hesse, called Hessians, to help fight and subdue the Americans. He goes out and hires 10,000 Hessian soldiers from the German state of Hesse. What's the modern term for people that are hired for military use?
Mercenaries.
Mercenaries. So you really have your first hiring of mercenaries here. He's gone out and hired 10,000. He's going to pay these Hessians to fight against the American colonists. That's a mercenary, somebody that's paid to go to war. What do you think about the Second Continental Congress after the Battle of Breeds Bunker Hill, of the three radical changes that they wanted, the radicals, which one did they actually do after this battle? They didn't declare independence yet, right? Because we haven't told you about the Declaration of Independence. So they either seized British officials or did what? Yeah, Mr. Nicholas?
So the story on good history teachers, they have to be master storytellers. That's just level one. So, is it true? Is he a good storyteller? Can he tell a story? I mean, you got to see the dust coming off the hills when he tells the story, right?
That's right. That's right.
And I've been with Randy a little bit, and he's told me some good ones.
We talked about you got to be a storyteller, right?
You can't live without
You
it.
can't live without it. And if you tell it good, they listen. If you tell it boring, they don't.
Well, it does make history come alive. Has he ever told you anything about Kennedy?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet.
These are the juniors.
We just don't, they're not ready. They can't handle the truth.
They are not prepped yet. They're just learning about heroes like Samuel Whittemore. Do you want to tell Mr. Nicholas? Hey, let me just do this. Kyra, tell Mr. Nicholas. Tell Mr. Nicholas about Samuel Whittemore.
Kyra
I
knows.
had to tell my parents yesterday.
Yeah.
She's looking at her notes.
Well, here, I'll let you off the hook. I'll let you off the hook. No, Warren had this discussion with me. Tell him about Samuel Whittemore. Tell Mr. Nicholas doesn't know anything about this great guy.
He was an old man. He was 87-year-old.
He wasn't always old. I mean, he was born on the earth.
No, don't get dyslexic on
Old
me
that
either.
time.
Okay,
Don't
at
get
this
dyslexic
point.
on me. How old was he?
78. He was 87.
No, don't get dyslexic on me. He was how old?
78.
There you go. Okay.
He was 78, and he was a retired British soldier, and he served in the army for 50 years. And he was chilling at his house, and a bunch of these British soldiers came by, and he was done with all of the crap that they had done. And so he pulled out his musket and shot one of them, then pulled out two
Dueling pistols. Very good.
pistols, and then shot two more people, and then came out with one of his swords and killed more people. And then they took their, what do you call parade?
Well, they
And then
shot him
bayonets.
first.
Bayonets. They shot him 12 times. They shot him and then stabbed him with bayonets 12 times.
And you think?
He lived through that.
Yeah.
97.
What was the following year like for him?
What was the following year for him? We're going to get into that. We're getting into the following year.
So that's an incredible guy. Don't mess with him.
Yeah, he lived 20 more years, Mr. Nicholson, died at 98.
You never know who's in front of you.
No.
I kind of want to tell my Jess Cornelius.
Go do it. We got time. Hey, this is part of
Okay,
learning
so-
outside of history.
So this is just a story that, well, it's incredible. It's about age. So in 1976, there was a drought. My family sold their ranch, and my dad bought another ranch in the Black Hills. And we moved there, and I had a neighbor there, an old cowboy, and he started to tell me stories about the ranch that we had bought. Was called the Cornelius place. Jess Cornelius had moved there in the 30s, and he had a wife with him, second or third wife, tough old cowboy, still carrying a 45 on his hip. He was driving 500 Weathers in there in the 30s. That's the Depression. He had a little cash money, and he talked what then was the FSA, Farm Service Agency, into a loan. But the kicker was he was 75 when he got there, when he arrived. And he was there 20 years and retired off that place. Made money all those years, retired into Custer, and died when he was 98. But when you're 75 and you start to ranch again, new, and talk a loan officer into a loan, who do you know that's 75 that could move to another place, start a ranch, get a loan, live there 20 years, and this is tough country, bad water.
During the Depression.
Yeah, and so that when you talked about that 78-year-old, I don't meet many guys that are that old that can start again, and I like those stories. It makes me feel like I'm young.
That's right.
Could keep going.
Here's how tough he is. I told these kids, I found out at 59 you can't go out and hit 200 golf balls and you'll work the darn the next day. So if you're 75 running a ranch.
There's some things age is not very flattering.
No.
Yeah, well, in a lot of ways. But anyway.
That's right. Well,
All right,
thanks,
enjoy.
well, thanks for joining us.
So,
How many hand there? That was
Kyra's
a good
keeping
story.
up. How's the Bomb Start kid doing?
Well, you know, we never compare siblings. We just try not to.
We just don't do it.
We just don't do it.
But if we're going to talk about Cody, if we were,
Yeah. Well, yeah. She's better looking than he is.
well, yeah, well,
Not
I'm
as tall, and they're about the same. They talk about the same.
Okay.
So she's good.
Okay.
We're going to keep her next week. I'll let you know next Friday whether we're going to.
Perfect. See you later.
Okay. Well, thanks. That's great. It's so awesome to have the superintendent come. I think that's great. They don't make it over. They're busy, and I'm thrilled he made it over to see what's going on. So let's back up now real quick, so we can get done. So of those three things that they talked about radically at the Second Continental Congress, which one did they actually do? They did. They sent diplomats not only to Spain and France, but they also sent diplomats to the Netherlands as well, because they were also enemies with Great Britain. So, the Second Continental Congress sees the events of the Battle of Breeds or Bunker Hill, and they decide to send diplomatic agents to request aid from France, Spain, and the Netherlands. Now, at this point, we have to protect Boston and Boston Harbor, right? And so what happens, early in 1776, George Washington takes the Continental Army and he moves and occupies an area known as Dorchester Heights. And Dorchester Heights is an area that overlooks both Boston and Boston Harbor because he does not want to lose either one of those places to the British. Okay? Now you got to remember that the British are kind of licking their wounds, aren't they? So Washington takes the Continental Army, he moves in and occupies Dorchester Heights. He's going to protect Boston and its harbor. And King George III is not overly thrilled with General Gage anymore because of the loss of life and the lack of progress, and General Gage underestimated the will of the colonists. So what's he do to General Gage? Fires him, basically, and he replaces him with another British general by the name of Sir William Howe. And it will be Sir William Howe's decision on whether he tries to control Boston and Boston Harbor or cut his losses and leave. So King George III, upset with General Gage, replaces him with another British general by the name of Sir William Howe. Howe is going to have to evaluate the situation, take a look at where Washington and the Continental Army are, and decide whether he wants to try to hold the city and the harbor any longer. Well, on March 17, 1776, General Howe makes his decision.
March what?
March 17, 1776, Sir William Howe makes his decision, and the British fleet sails out of Boston Harbor. Sails out. What do they take with them? All those soldiers, British soldiers, and what else might they take with them? Human being-wise.
Slaves?
No,
Prisoners of war.
no, opposite.
Oh,
Loyalists. Very good. So, the British fleet sails out of Boston Harbor on March 17, 1776, with British soldiers and approximately 1,000 civilian loyalists. Probably a good move to get on that ship if you were a loyalist in Boston. Probably a real good move. Okay, that will set up, and we'll start on this, that will set up our next subtopic, which is the Battle of Moores Creek Bridge. The Battle of Moores Creek Bridge. How many ever heard of that battle? Like, if any of you did, I would be shocked. So it's got another name, it's more important. Anybody know what its other name is? Anybody know what the other name for the Battle of Moores Creek Bridge is? You need to know this. The Lexington and Concord of the South. Why would it be called that? Because it'll be the first battle of the Revolutionary War fought south. And it'll be fought in North Carolina. Get all this down. We're not done yet. So, the Battle of Moores Creek Bridge is often referred to as the Lexington and Concord of the South because it is the first battle of the Revolutionary War that is fought in the southern part of the colonies, namely North Carolina. Now the last bit of information I'll give you before we quit, and we'll move on to this tomorrow, is that there's a reason this battle occurred, right? And the reason it occurred is because the governor of North Carolina wanted to ensure that all of the citizens in North Carolina stayed loyal to the king. Okay, so the governor of North Carolina was a very strong loyalist, and he wanted to ensure that all the colonists in North Carolina also stayed loyal to the English crown. Is that very easy to control? I mean, you're going to tell everybody in here that they have to stay loyal to someone that they are not interested in being loyal to? And the only way to make them loyal is to by force, which leads to a battle. which the battle will be called the Battle of Moores Creek Bridge, or the Lexington and Concord of the South. And tomorrow we will tell you what happens there. Okay? So there we go.